everybody, and welcome to Project HR, a podcast dedicated to building better workplaces. I'm your host, Jennifer Orqua, COO of Projections, and today we're discussing an 8-letter word that might as well be a 4-letter word, judging by the way it makes most of us feel. I'm talking about feedback. And while it's a critical part of corporate improvement and performance, the process brings with it a lot of baggage for everyone involved. Can we fix the feedback process and make it a more productive and less stressful effort? Our guest today certainly believes we can. Joining us today is Tamra Chandler, partner and principal at EY, and author of Feedback and Other Dirty Words, Why We Fear It, How to Fix It. We're so happy you're here, Tamra.
Oh, thank you. I'm super excited to be here. Thanks, Jennifer.
Sure. So let's start off with, fixing the feedback process. Let's be clear. Are we talking about the process of giving feedback or receiving it or both?
We're really talking about everything to do with feedback. And we really think we should start with how we seek feedback because we can lower a lot of the stress and the fear if we think about starting there. But we're really talking about everything:
That makes
offering,
sense.
receiving, and giving.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So why is feedback important? What does it do for us?
Well, all of us want to grow, all of us want to thrive, all of us want to know that we're valuable and that the work that we do matters. And it's through feedback that we can do all of those things. Now, I can give you the really scientific answer. If we look at it at an organizational level, those organizations that lean into strong feedback cultures that are growth oriented, future focused,
Hmm.
outperform those that don't 2 to 1.
Sure.
If you look at how leaders are assessed, those leaders who are recognized for being good at feedback, and we'll talk more about what that means, but those leaders are always higher rated, have higher engaged teams. Like, it's phenomenal. It's like the leader superpower if people really take it seriously.
Hmm.
But at the individual level, it really is about what's important to me and how do I get the insights I need that help me be better at those things that are important to me.
I love that. Yeah, we see that a lot with our own clients, and the better companies are the ones that are able to give and receive that feedback. So, do you feel that there's any kind of stigma associated with that? Why are people reluctant?
there's, there's huge stigma, right? That's why we called it feedback and other dirty words. And to your
Yep.
intro, the 4-letter word, we had even played with the title like the F word. Um, we really, really struggle with this word. I like to say feedback has a horrible brand. Like
Mm,
the word itself has a horrible brand. I mean, most people, if you even say the word feedback, they put this phantom word negative in front of it, right? It
mm,
means something that's coming at me that's going to hurt, that's going to be painful, that's maybe not fair. So we really have to take a step back and redefine this whole word because it really has a bad brand.
yeah, that's super insightful. So, how do you think that that's happened? How has feedback gotten such a bad rap?
I think I think it starts like I joke, it starts at the playground. It starts with the conversations you had with your siblings, right? We
Hmm.
we all sort of learn feedback in this not very positive way. I also think in Western cultures, we have this belief that is completely not true, but we sort of believe that if I'm going to make you better, Jennifer, the best way I should do that is tell you all the things you're doing wrong, and you'll emerge from that a better person. But
But I
that
might not
doesn't
like you much.
actually, you won't like me much, and you won't trust me anymore.
Right.
You won't in the end be a better person. So we have a lot of false beliefs about feedback. But interestingly, when we were writing the book, we actually went back and said, why do we fear it? Like, let's really peel that
Mm,
onion. Let's try to get at the essence of why we fear it.
hmm.
And so much of it is just it's in our DNA. It's in just the way we show up as humans, right? So
Hmm.
we had this idea of keeping ourselves safe. And so our brains intentionally cling to bad things. They cling to things that we think we should be on alert for.
Hmm.
And so whenever we receive even positive feedback, often that just flows right off us. We don't take it in at all. But what we connect to are the negative things. So when we think about feedback,
Sure.
that's why we tend to think about, we say we're positively negative. We think about the negative. But also at the heart of it, what we all care about is being part of something, being connected, knowing that we're important, that I see you,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And we worry that if we receive feedback that says you're not worthy, you're not part of us, you're not
Mm.
doing what you should do, it gets really to the essence of what we care about. Like,
Mhm.
no, but I need to be part. It's like back to when we were in tribes. We needed to be part of that tribe, right? And to
Mhm.
be pushed out of the tribe at that time maybe even meant your death,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so we really, at the essence of it, it's that belonging. We really want to know that we're okay and we're accepted, and feedback threatens that.
Mhm. All right. Well, shifting gears for just a minute, let's talk about the book. Let's talk about feedback and other dirty words. This isn't your first literary venture into performance management. Can you tell us a little bit about your first book?
Yeah. So um, back in 2014, 15, I wrote it and it was published in 2016 as How Performance Management is Killing Performance and What to Do About It.
Mm.
And at that time, I was working with clients, and it became just so clear to me that we were all like 90+% of organizations were using an approach to performance management that just simply didn't deliver on what we hoped. Like there was
Hmm.
all the best intentions, but if we're trying to develop people, if we're trying to align people and drive engagement, we weren't doing any of that with traditional performance management. So the
Hmm.
first book really looked at why is that? What are the fatal flaws in the traditional model? And then we looked at where do we need to go and how we shift to new ideas. And that book's really dense because we literally laid out our whole methodology and process for how to transform, how to reboot performance management.
That sounds fascinating. I think that probably really insightful. I'd like to read it. Maybe I will get my hands on that. So tell me, what inspired you and your co-author, Laura Graylish, to try and fix feedback and to write this book?
Perfect segue because the two are connected. So we
Hmm.
wrote the first book on performance management, and we've been out there working with clients of all sizes, from all parts of the world to fix this process. And while we fundamentally believe that every organization should have their own unique approach to performance management, should be aligned to their people and their mission and their strategy and their culture, what we know is there's certain elements that will always be present, and the most prominent of those is creating a culture that has a healthy feedback environment where I really do learn and grow from the feedback that I engage in.
Hmm.
And whenever we would get to that part and be talking about to companies about how or organizations about how do we make this happen, we would start to hear all the, oh my gosh, we're horrible at feedback, or nobody around
Mm.
here knows how to give feedback, or we're just too nice and nobody will ever talk to each other, or
Sure.
we have all this triangulation going on. So we'd hear all the stories.
Hmm.
And what became really clear to Laura and I was we'll never accomplish our goal of transforming and rebooting performance management if we don't fix feedback.
Feedback. Hmm.
So that's why we wrote the second book was like, man, we gotta start a movement. We gotta fix this if we're gonna make the world a better place.
Brilliant. I love it. So, feedback and other dirty words, and I love that title. It definitely communicates its positioning as a practical and irreverent guide. That sense of practicality and humor, I feel like that's really critical to making it more accessible to people. Did you know from the start that you wanted to come at feedback from sort of a lighter angle?
Well, anybody who knows me would tell you I probably come at everything from a lighter angle.
Yeah.
I feel like we take ourselves, way too seriously. I mean, I always take the work I do seriously, but I just don't think we can take ourselves too seriously. And
Hmm.
I really wanted this book to be something that was for everyone because we think that feedback starts with each of us. And so we wanted to have it be a book that was light and easy that you could pick up and read on an airplane if any of us were sitting on an airplane, and take away tips and tricks. And we really designed it so you could go back to it, right? We organized it so, I'm getting ready to seek some feedback. What are the tips that are in the book? So we really wanted to make it, my dream would be people would have it, flagged and folded and tabs put on it where, I
Hmm.
want to go back to that piece because we really wanted it to be easy and accessible and help.
Yeah, I love that. And that's my favorite kind of reading is actionable, where I'm going through it. I'm like, yes, this one, and that, and I could do that. So
Right.
tell me a little bit. Who is sort of the target for this book? Did you have someone in mind as you were writing it for your audience?
Every human.
True, true.
It's funny because if you read the foreword, when we first started talking about it, we were like, "Oh, feedback's every one of us. We can fix feedback for everybody. You have to talk to your sister and you have to talk to your mom." And,
Hmm.
and as I was sitting here literally in the early days of writing, I sat down and I thought, "Okay, wait a minute. My expertise is in organizations. It's in a business, enterprise, nonprofit kind of mode. That's where I am in my sweet spot and I can help. I'm not the best person. I mean, of course, I'd offer you any opinion on how to talk to your mother, but I'm probably not the person you should go to on that, right? And so I actually had this sort of epiphany, and I wrote my publisher and said, "Hey, Neil, I really think that this just has to be a business book. I mean, sure, it could be applied to anything, but I really want it to speak to how do we help organizations solve this problem." And my husband came home and I said, "Hey, honey, I had this big epiphany. I'm really writing this book just from a business context." And my husband looked at me and goes, "Well, that's good, honey, because you're not a relationship expert." And I just looked at it, I said, "Okay, I'm gonna put a pin in that comment, and we'll come back to that one later, you and me."
Hmm.
But,
Hmm.
we had a good giggle about, "No, I'm not a
Sure.
relationship expert, but I've been in the business context for years and really wanted to help organizations, whether you're for profit, not for profit. We're working right now with a state, how do we help you fix this?"
All right, Tamra, we're going to take a quick sponsorship break right now. But when we come back, I want to talk about the ways that we can all fix feedback in our own organizations. So stay with us. Is your company at risk for a union organizing attempt? The NLRB's numbers are in, and here's what they reveal. The number of union certification elections has roughly doubled every single month since the pandemic hit in April. Similarly, the number of employees eligible to vote in a certification election doubled in May, doubled again in June, and doubled again in July. If you look at year-over-year stats, the rate at which unions won certification went from just 55% in June of 2019 to 76% in June of 2020. Finally, in July, the total number of employees eligible to vote surpassed levels for the same month of 2019. But these stats don't mean a lot if you don't know where you stand. Projections wants you to find out if your company is vulnerable now with a free online audit. We'll dig into your culture, safety, and other internal factors, as well as external factors like a local presence. To do your own 5-minute assessment, go to bit.ly/organizing risk. That's bit.ly/organizing risk. Identify and address your challenges to avoid becoming part of the statistics. We're back with Tamra Chandler, author of Feedback and Other Dirty Words, Why We Fear It and How to Fix It. And Tamra, I want to dig in a little bit. We talked earlier about the items in the book that are actionable, which I love. I love that part of it. But to fix something, you first have to identify what's broken. So what's specifically broken about the ways in which we all currently handle feedback?
Oh, wow, that's a big question. But I think the thing that we focused on, and it's in the subtitle, is the fear, right? We attribute feedback to putting us in a fear state, and we tend to want to avoid that, right? So we need to really figure out how do we down level the fear and how do we up level the trust so we can start to engage in a process where feedback is seen as something that is going to help us and not hurt us. And I think that's at the root of it is we haven't gotten the good juju out of feedback. We don't
Hmm.
think of it that way. We think of it in this negative light. And until we shift our paradigm, until we change our thinking to see feedback as something that's helpful,
Mm-hmm.
is going to be really important. And I just want to add here because I think this is such an interesting element. When you look at self-reported information about do I want more feedback, everyone will always say yes, and they'll even say in the results that they want more constructive feedback, if we use that word, than they
Mm-hmm.
want positive feedback. Well, when you see that data, don't believe any of it
Yeah.
because we self-report that, but we actually, if that was true, then wouldn't we all be out seeking a lot more feedback? Wouldn't we
Mm-hmm.
be engaging in the process a lot more? And going back to that leader research, what we see is leaders who are the most highest rated are those who really engage in a lot of positive future growth oriented feedback, and they aren't huge leaders that's telling you everything you're doing wrong. And so while we say we want all that constructive feedback, what we really want is people to help us understand what we're doing great and how we can do more of that and take us to that next level.
Love that. So even if we fix it, based on what you're telling me, is it really just destined to remain a contentious process? I mean, is feedback inherently bad? Do we, we kind of curl up in a ball in the corner of the room and don't want to hear it?
Oh, Jennifer, I'm such an optimist. Gosh, I hope not. But I am also a realist, and we have such a huge way to go, right?
Hmm.
So, one of the things that we did in the book was we offered a new definition of feedback, and I think we just have to start there. We just have to help people step away from that idea that this is about fixing you and lean into the idea this is about fixing feedback, and
Hmm.
that feedback should be about helping us grow and thrive and advance. It should be helping and not hurting. And once we can start to let tune into that, that's where we can go forward. And so what's good is there's a lot of other things happening out there that are going to help us, right? So there's, Carol Dweck's around growth mindset
Hmm.
is starting to be more ubiquitous. People are really listening and tuning into the amazing work that she did.
Hmm.
And so if we start to adopt more of those policies, and Laura and I converted that into this idea of if we flip the switch from prove to improve, if we get out of trying to prove we're good, prove we're smart, prove we're right, prove we knew the answer, if we can get out of that mode and we can step into the like, hey, we're all a work in process and we're all trying to improve the processes, our team engagement, how we contribute, how we show up, and are open to that, then I think we can fix feedback.
I love that concept of changing prove to improve. That's brilliant. So in the book, I love how you outline the foundations of fixing feedback. Can you share with our
Hmm.
listeners a little bit about what those foundations are and how that works?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, we talk about trust. And I earlier I said
Hmm.
we need to down level the fear and up level the trust.
Hmm.
When we trust each other, we then are able to have conversations that we hear, that are open, that are collaborative. And so I think one of the things that we need to do is just connect more. And this is so important now in this era where we are physically disconnected.
Hmm.
We really have to take the time to get to know each other, to connect. So in the book, we talk about Gottman's research, which he did based on marriages and what marriages
Hmm.
survive,
Hmm.
but we translated that into relationships. Well, what relationships are going to survive? Well, relationships where I have positive connections. And I'm not even talking about positive feedback. I'm just saying where you and I talk and have a cup of coffee and I ask, how things are going, how are your kids, how are, whatever that conversation is. Or together we tackle a tough project and we succeed and we've built greater trust and connection through that. Once we have stronger connection, then we can have harder conversations. We can be
Hmm.
able to say, hey, I love you and here's the thing I'm seeing that's getting in your way. How can I help you bust through it, right? And so we really need to start with trust. That's like the root of all the
Yeah,
foundation.
for sure. For
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, I love that. I love that connection to trust and really that's what it's all about. So your plan explores the roles that we all play in the delivery and the reception of feedback. Can you tell us about those roles and how does that work?
Yeah, it maybe sort of seemed obvious that, hey, we all play these different roles in feedback, but we wanted to get really clear on defining them and then talking about how we're kind of disrupting the roles. So we talk about three roles of feedback: the seeker, the receiver, and the extender. Now, we all play all three roles pretty much every day, but there's some disruption that's happening here. We're saying the power is with the seeker. So we really want people to say, look, I'm going to get out there and start to seek feedback that's important to me, what I care about, what matters to me from the people I trust and I feel like I can have healthy conversations with, those people.
Hmm.
As a receiver, we may be receiving feedback whether we ask for it or not, but I think we all have work to do too and how we take that in. Like even just how we take in the good stuff, like I mentioned before. We're really good at dismissing it. And Jennifer, as women, we're really, really good at
Yep,
dismissing it.
for sure. Yep.
And so we need to give ourselves some grace. We need to take that in. I talk about in the book, like I have an email file of good things, and when I'm having a bad day, I'll go and
Hmm.
read like love I got from people that
Yeah.
remind myself,
Yeah.
like old Smiley, I'm good enough.
Right.
Gosh darn
Yep.
it, people like me.
Yep.
Like we need that. We need
Yeah.
that sometimes for
Yeah.
ourselves. So as receivers, we need to work on how we receive. And then as extenders, this is where if you're a manager or leader, you're no longer the be all, know all, tell all. Laura would say you can't yell and sell anymore. You really have to be the person who is going to engage in conversations that is about the seeker's interest. So
Mhm.
it's no longer your agenda, it's their agenda. And
Mhm.
you're there to help and offer what you've witnessed, what you experience, what you know, which is your own reality, may not be theirs, but is yours, and offer that up uh, in a conversation that you can have and together sort of build a plan forward.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that in the book, and, our listeners are probably frantically scribbling all this down right now, those who haven't read the book. I know they are, I can feel it. So tell me a little bit about the 3 Fs.
Yes. So every movement. So as I said, we are starting a movement to fix feedback, right? And every
Mhm.
movement needs flags you're going to fly under, and ours
Right.
fly under the 3 Fs: fairness, focus, and frequency. And we have to start with fairness because we've talked about trust, and if what I'm receiving or if the conversation I'm engaging in doesn't feel fair, then my trust is broken.
Mhm.
And so we really have to start with fairness. And fairness means we need to set aside judgment and bias and perspective because we're all human, we're all biased. It just comes with the package. So we need to be able to set that aside and lean more into, as I mentioned earlier, here's what I've noticed, here's what I'm witnessing, here's my reality, and just be offering that up, but without judgment and bias. Focus means let's focus on, as we say in the book, one thing. We
Mhm.
can't process a million things, and I don't know about you, Jennifer, but with COVID, with the pandemic, with everything going, I can process
So
even less
much.
now, right?
Mhm. Yep.
So don't lay a big old list on me. Here's your
Mhm.
3 ups and your 3 downs, or this is part of the reason the annual performance review just
Mhm.
doesn't deliver. There's so much information. Tell me what's the one thing that's really important. And so, as seekers, we say, ask for that one thing. What's the one thing you want to know? Get specific, keep it focused. And then the way we really drive all of it is with the last F, with this frequency.
Mhm.
And the more frequently we're asking people, the more sources that we're tapping into, the more we're going to learn and understand. And sometimes we need to triangulate pieces of information we get from different sources at different times, and it starts to really tell us a story. The really amazing thing is frequency is also a huge driver against bias, right? And
Mhm.
in this day of social justice, we need to really be thinking about that because the more frequent feedback we get, the less it's going to be influenced by recency bias or halo or devil bias or any of those, kind of things that influence often the feedback we receive.
And one thing I wanted to talk about too, you're talking about frequency. I think that the book talks about annual reviews, and I think that that
Mm.
assessment is so spot on. That ritual monologue and how it forces participants to like suit up for battle. I love the idea of feedback being a more fluid and ongoing conversation. That's that frequency thing. Can you tell us a little bit more about your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think the annual performance review and my pure optimism one day will be a thing of the past. Our my grandchildren will go, "A what?"
Wouldn't that be
um,
nice?
wouldn't that be nice? If you can think back on the most important feedback anyone gave you, what was it, and how was it delivered? My experiences has been when I ask that people that question, it's almost always something that happened in a moment or at a time, and it
Hmm.
almost always is something that said, I see you. I know you have more in you. I know you can go further. It's always in that vein. That's not what happens in annual performance reviews, right? But
Mm-hmm.
those moments occur at the end of a meeting or at the end of a project when
Hmm.
you're talking to your friend about how you work together. Or I tell a story in the book about how I was working on a project, a strategic project at Hitachi, my last organization, a couple of times ago,
Hmm.
and my colleague said, "I haven't seen you this excited about something in forever."
Oh,
And
yeah.
that one little comment drove
Mhm.
me to launch a new company and change my career and do everything because it was just it like hit me like a freight train. Oh
Mhm.
my gosh, she's right. I haven't been this excited about something in years, and I need to be excited about something. And so sometimes it's those little drops, those little things that will make the most impact on people. And so imagine if we just let go of these big, heavy, annual reviews. We're going to put the box of Kleenex in the middle of the table. We're going to have this big conversation. If we let go of that and we just in the moment are able to offer each other, bits of wisdom, things we're witnessing, wonderful things we're seeing in front of us, that is how we're going to grow. That is how we're going to build trust. And that is going to create better organizations and better outcomes.
That is brilliant. And it goes right back to what you were saying at the very beginning about the difference between, we're going to take this from proving something to improving something.
Right.
So I love that. I love that little mantra. So let's talk about developmental feedback versus evaluative feedback.
I said earlier when I was talking about fairness that we need to step away from judgment. And so I think if we are setting like if we set a goal and that goal is to open, you know, 2 new accounts before the end of the next quarter, and we get to the end of the quarter and we haven't done that, we can have an evaluative, if you will, conversation about did we accomplish that goal or not? And then we can talk about, well, what got in our way, how can we make sure we can accomplish that goal next time? So there can be an evaluative element, or if it is something measurable that we can point at
Okay.
and it's
Hmm.
fact based, right?
Okay.
But if it's like, well, we didn't achieve that goal because you just didn't work hard enough,
Hmm.
that's an evaluative perspective that we shouldn't be in that realm. We should say, "Hey, here's what I noticed is we plan to have 40 lead conversations and we only had 10. Let's talk about why we only had 10 because it seems to me like that might have been why we didn't get these 2 new accounts we wanted. Our
Hmm.
funnel wasn't big enough, right?"
Hmm.
So then you're engaging in a conversation. You're not passing judgment. You're saying, "This is what I witnessed. We
Hmm.
planned for 40, we had 10. I'm not sure why we had 10 and not 40. Can you help me understand?" Right? And then maybe
Hmm.
the person said, "Hey, I called 300 and I could only get 10 meetings," right? There
Hmm.
may be facts we don't know. So we don't want to be evaluative. We want to engage in a conversation when it's something that we might want to we have a tendency to apply our assumptions or our perspectives to that we just don't know the facts.
Yeah.
So we really want to operate in facts and not when we talk about evaluation and not in my own opinion.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I think that goes right back to what you were saying earlier about the role that trust plays in feeding and fixing feedback.
Right.
So, yeah. So, any other pointers with developing trust? And I can definitely see in the example you just gave how that would build trust. Any other thoughts there on trust and how you helps fix feedback?
Well, and that is, I think that our biggest recommendation is the connections, like just take the time to connect so you build that
Hmm.
trust.
Hmm.
Um, but always come into something wanting to have the conversation, wanting to engage the other person in their perspectives because, there especially now things are going on with people. People are trying
Hmm.
to get their kids through school and do their job and keep their parent healthy, and there's
Right.
just so much going on. I think we have to understand what that is before we start passing judgment or perspective on have you been productive enough or doing the right work, right? So
Yep.
we just need to walk carefully there.
Love that. Tamara, we're going to take a quick time out for another break, and we'll be right back after this. You're listening to the Project HR podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Oraqua, and our guest today is Tamra Chandler, author of Feedback and Other Dirty Words, Why We Fear It and How to Fix It. We're back, and in the book, Tamra, you call feedback the secret sauce to increasing a leader's effectiveness.
Hmm.
Why is feedback so key to a leadership?
Well, I think what people want from their leader is someone that is helping them thrive, helping them achieve the outcomes that they're looking for. And I think that when we take off the hat of knower and teller and we put on the hat of coach and supporter and barrier blocker, or barrier buster, sorry,
Right? Yep.
that's what people want from leaders. I don't need you to do my job. I want you to help me do my job great, right? And so I think leaders that lean into feedback really are getting at the root of what we want, like help me help you, right? And so I think that that's super important. I also think that if you take it at a team construct, leaders who engage their teams in conversations that are essentially feedback conversations, whether those are retrospectives on a project that you did, or input on a strategic goal that is being set, or even, how did this meeting go? I think when we open ourselves up to having those conversations with our teams, we become better because we learn from that, and B, again, we build that trust because then people are like, wow, I can actually say this meeting really sucked, like we didn't have an
Hmm.
agenda. Hopefully you wouldn't say that
Right.
wouldn't be great feedback, but you know what I mean. I can offer
Yep.
and say, gosh, I really wish we had had an agenda. I was kind of lost in what the conversation was. I think all that builds trust with the leader and creates stronger teams. So there's both the team level and me as an individual. How are you helping me achieve great
Hmm.
results that make us all better?
Yeah. So you shared a quote from Zenger and Folkman that was really eye opening. I thought that the top 10% of people who ask for feedback were in the 86th percentile for leadership effectiveness, and the people who were the bottom 10% of that feedback loop
Right,
were in the 15th percentile for leadership.
right,
So there's a clear correlation between
totally.
feedback and effectiveness.
Yeah, I'm a Zinger Folkman fangirl, so which is sort of funny. There's probably they don't have a lot of fandoms. Probably there's probably no fan site for Zinger and Folkman,
Yeah, I don't
but
think so. They have posters or
I don't think so. But their research is just so powerful, and particularly around leaders and what makes great leaders. And I think they would agree with me that feedback could be a superpower for those leaders.
definitely. So, how can leaders mitigate the fear that's involved inherently in feedback?
Well, I think, we always say leaders go first. And so the most important thing that leaders can do is say, I'm going to adopt a lot of these practices and tips that we offer. I'm going to become a seeker of feedback. And like I said, that can be at a team level. I'm just going to start opening up every one of our meetings at the end for, what we do, like loved it, learned it, lose it. What are the
Hmm.
mechanisms that we're going to do that help us just collectively get better, but have provide that white space for opportunity. I think leaders can start to reach out to their team and say, hey, I'm working on this thing. I'd love you to do a little noticing for me and tell me if you see me, showing up in the way that I'm working on. I would love to hear if that's helping. um, I think those are all things that leaders can do. I think that obviously when you do that, you have to be a good receiver as well, right? So if you want
Hmm.
to bring the
Sure.
fear down, you can't
Hmm.
say I want this input, and then if someone gives it to you, have them feel like they paid for it, they paid a price for
Hmm.
it. Which, when you
Yeah.
talk a lot of, unfortunately, you talk to a lot of people that say I could never say that to my manager or my
Right.
team
Right.
leader. I would pay for it. I would get the next crappy assignment. And
Hmm.
so I think we all have to, leaders included, be in that improve space and say, hey, we're all working on this stuff, and
Yeah.
go from there. And like I said, in
Yeah.
the end, you'll end up with stronger teams and better outcomes. So,
Yeah. And greater trust.
yeah.
So, can you tell us a little bit more about your work with EY and your role there?
Yeah. So, I had my little team of at People Firm. We were about 60 strong and doing work across all elements of people, driving performance through people. And we just felt like we had so much to offer, and we only had so much reach. And so we scouted about and looked for a partner that could help us really take our content to the next level, and
Hmm.
that turns out to be EY. And so we're super excited to be here. EY is making huge investments in this whole people space, and our point of view and perspective has just sort of slotted right in there. And
Hmm.
I keep joking that I now have 250,000 salespeople who can go out and campaign on the fixed feedback movement. So I'm really
Yeah.
hoping that we're able to use EY as a platform really to help drive this and to get our message out there in a much bigger way.
I wanted to let our listeners know that links to EY's website, as well as the links to where you can buy feedback and other dirty words, as well as Tamra's first book, How Performance Management is Killing Performance and What to Do About It, Rethink, Redesign, Reboot, will be included in the episode's companion guide. So be sure to sign up for it today, projectionsinc.com/podcast. Right now, though, Tamra, it's time for our lightning round questions.
Uh-oh.
And these are questions we ask every guest, so don't be scared. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So our first question is always a topic showdown. So in this episode, we've been talking about fixing the corporate feedback process. For situations that can't be fixed by your book, in your opinion, which of these can fix just about anything? Duct tape or chocolate?
Well, I think chocolate, but I would also throw French fries in there because for me, French fries can pretty much fix anything.
Yep. I'm a salty person myself. I hear you. Other than your book, of course, tell me what the best book you've read recently might be.
Well, it's summertime, and I think you need to read something fun. And so I recently read the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, which was...
I have not heard of that.
Oh my God. It's a creepy but really good story. And it has more layers than you would expect. But that was a fun read. Yeah.
Very good. I always love a good vampire story. So tell me, what's your favorite thing about working in performance management?
My favorite thing are the aha moments. When we start to help people see that this can be something completely different from what they've experienced before. We worked with a large healthcare organization on the East Coast, and we had a nurse that she was like chief of nursing that sat on our design team, and she wrote every year over 100 reviews because their span of control is so huge in the healthcare arena. And those reviews were like 9 pages or 12 pages or some ridiculous amount. And we redesigned their process to be a single page. And I remember sitting in the meeting and looking at her face, and I was like, what's going on? There's something going on in your head. And she just looked at me and she just said, I'm just imagining not writing all those pages. Like I'm just imagining how my life just changed. And that's what I love, is those aha moments.
That's a huge aha moment. So tell me what the best piece of advice you've ever been given is. Oh,
I think the best piece of advice ever again comes from my dad, who is sort of a brilliant folky guy. And we have this joke around, dang me, take a rope and hang me. Like, we all make mistakes. It's from an old country western song, but we all make mistakes, and just being able to show up and say, I messed up, I made a mistake, I'm not perfect, back to the, we're all improving, we're all a work in process. I think that is such good advice, and unfortunately I see so many people unwilling to do that.
Yep. Especially because it builds trust as well.
Right.
So last question, who or what inspires you?
Who or what inspires me? I thrive on the people I work with. So I would just say, when I was at People Firm, it was just the group of people I worked with there, because they're all brilliant and tested me and pushed me, and that inspired me all the time. And I'm getting that and more at EY. So that's what's important to me, is just those connections and relationships with the people who we sit with day in and day out.
That's wonderful. Yeah. So thanks so much for joining me today on this week's episode of Project HR, Tamra.
Oh, thank you. This has been so much fun. I could just keep talking.
And I could too. But we better wrap it up. We want to thank our listeners. And as always, this is your reminder to grab the companion guide for this episode at projectionsinc.com/podcast. And for anyone who may have missed our last episode, we want to let you know that this November, Project HR is celebrating its 1-year anniversary. We'll be celebrating with a giveaway and a best of show. I've heard rumors of cake, so stay tuned for more on that. Finally, we hope you'll subscribe to Project HR and give us a handful of stars wherever you get your content. Your ratings allow us to be more visible and help more people to find us, so we appreciate your help in growing our audience. That's it from me for now. Let's make it a great day at work.